Goetia, which is a system of magic that I've had some really fantastic results from working with. And it's also been a very great source of inspiration for my artwork. So I'm going to start today with a little presentation that I put together that talks about the history of the Goetia expressed through art through the years, and now it's certainly not a full history, but it's pieces of art that I felt like were relevant to it. And then after that, I'll talk about some of my personal experiences and things that I found useful to other people who are interested in practicing Goetia. And then finally, some pieces of my artwork that are relevant to my studies with the system of magic. So behind me is my painting, Guiding Light. And this painting is about demonic possession. And so now let's go into the history presentation. So King Solomon is mentioned in Jewish folklore and also in the Talmud and Midrash. And legends of him and his demons start popping up during the period of the Babylonian exile. And so Solomon was a great king. His father was the King David, and he built the first great temple in Jerusalem where the Ark of the Covenant was housed. And legend goes that demons actually helped him build this temple. And the Goetia is one of the 5 books in the Lesser Key of Solomon. And so those grimoires are attributed to him. And there's a lot of different sorts of folk tales about him that span across many different cultures. One that I found particularly interesting is from the book Solomon and the Queen of Saba, and that's present in Biblical Legends of the Muslims, a collection of Islamic stories of the prophets. And in this story, King Solomon is awaiting a visit from the Queen of Sheba, and before he meets her, he speaks with his demons, and they tell him that she has cloven feet and is part demon herself. And so he becomes then quite worried, because if he were to have a child with a woman who is part demon, then the child would grow up to be more powerful than him. So they set up this way to trick her, to reveal her feet when she comes into his temple. But she ends up coming early, and the trick doesn't work, but he sees her feet anyway, and they appear fine, so then they just end up having sex anyway. And so this pictured here is a later, obviously, depiction of King Solomon, one of his great judgments that you've probably heard the story where there was a baby and 2 women were fighting over being its mother. And King Solomon was also, legend has it that he was able to see into people's hearts. And that's this picture is an allegory of that, as well as legend has it that he was able to hear the voices of animals and understand them. And so apparently King Solomon worked with these spirits, and he is the figure in history where this initially originated. And so moving along, demons that can be worked with in this sort of way continue to pop up. In 1,000 Nights and a Night, there's many stories that talk about King Solomon and these spirits, which are also called jinn or genii. And these are where the stories of these genies that are trapped in lamps, and they can grant you wishes, which is the same sort of things that the demons in the Goetia can do for you. And so pictured here is an example of a genii appearing. And so then after that, I also found these pictures from the marvels of things created and miraculous aspects of things from 1283. And so here's 6 animal-headed jinn, all snapping their fingers. And so these creatures are depictions of these same sort of spirits. And what I thought to be rather interesting about it is we can see they look kind of friendly, like they don't look scary or ominous. They look a little creepy, especially that one down there at the bottom in yellow. But they don't really look like terrifying monsters as we see demons depicted later on. And so then the Book of Wonders I found to be quite striking in terms of the sigils. And so here's the Black King of the Jinns. And this was a book that contained various astrological information and horoscopes and magic spells. And I've put together a couple of images from it that I thought were kind of neat. So here's a demon being watched by two men from that 14th century manuscript, and you can see two humans are looking at a spirit that has been evoked before them in some sort of container. And I definitely feel like this is resemblant of the Goetia. And here is another three-headed demon. Yeah, and I think it's interesting how we can see how they're sort of becoming a bit more ominous, and you can see the stars in the background and how these cultures are all learning from one another. And so then we get to other parts of the world later in time, and demons and the idea of working with demons was now seen as something very dangerous that would damn you to hell. And so now we see demons being portrayed in artwork as a means of terrifying people and of controlling them.
Do you know what caused that change, that shift?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the church wanting people to stop participating in pagan rituals and come and be part of the church. So they were using art to as a media tool, because that was like how people saw messages back in the day. And by having these grand displays of intricate demons and people burning in hell, it was able to like control people and make them more afraid of the things that they were once worshiping. And here we have Belial and the demons, and just some more pictures that show demons, being scary. And this one I thought was rather interesting as well, especially in terms of King Solomon. So Saint Wolfgang converted a lot of people, and he also built a lot of churches. But his legend is actually far more interesting than the things he actually did. So legend has it that he was out in the woods with his axe looking for a place to build a church. And he couldn't find anywhere to build his church. So he went up onto the top of the hill and raised his axe in the air and said, "God, wherever I throw my axe, I'm going to build a church there." So he tosses his axe, and then he goes off to try to find it. And so while he's looking for his axe and a place to find a church, he comes across a wolf. And he says to the wolf, "Wolf, will you help me find a place to build my church?" And the wolf said, "No, I need to run. Someone is after me. I won't help you build your church." And the wolf runs off. And then shortly after, a hunter comes, and he asks the hunter, "Will you help me build my church?" And the hunter says, "No, I've been chasing this wolf my whole life. I'm not going to stop and help you find the place for your church." So the hunter goes off to follow the wolf. And then the devil appears. And the devil says, "Sure, Wolfgang, I'll help you build your church, but the first soul that enters your church belongs to me." And so Wolfgang says, "Okay." And so the devil helps him build this magnificent church, and they're just about done building it, and they have the front door propped open so the fumes can be let out, and Wolfgang is going back over the deal he just made with the devil and kind of contemplating whether or not that was a good idea and talking to him about it. And the devil said, "No, you made that contract with me, you can't get out of it." And then, out of the woods, the wolf comes running, and the wolf running from the hunter and runs into the door of the church. And so then that wolf, his soul then was a property of the devil. And so in that way, St. Wolfgang had tricked the devil into not taking a human soul, and the wolf was lamenting over having his soul taken, and Wolfgang said, "Well, you didn't help me build my church, so you are doomed." And the hunter is sad as well because he wanted to kill this wolf and he didn't get to. And he said, "Well, because of your pride, you don't get to kill the wolf either, so your fate is that." And then begrudgingly the devil goes back off to hell with the wolf's soul. And so I thought that was particularly interesting because here we have a religious figure who, in legend, is using demonic entities to build a religious building for them, just as King Solomon supposedly did.
Why did the devil have a face in his butt?
Yeah, so let's go back here. So that's an interesting point, and I thought that was kind of interesting because you'll see in the next slide the demons also have faces on their butts. I feel like that probably has to do with demonizing like sexuality, and by putting like a scary face over the reproductive organs, that's possibly what they're alluding to. I'm not entirely certain, but it definitely is creepy. I thought that was sort of fun. I guess nice cloven feet. And so here you can see there's a little face on the butt, right? And so
that makes it hard to sit.
yeah, and so here is another depiction, but this is from the same, like from the Middle Ages once again, but here they're talking about Solomon in the Middle Ages. So we have Belial presenting his credentials to Solomon, and so here we go, the demon is, yeah, showing him his resume. I assumed so that they can prove that they're good enough to do his bidding and build a great temple for him. So, now, let's go back 1 second. Here we go. We're in the right place. So, the Sloane Manuscripts are some of the earliest manuscripts that exist that contain Solomonic grimoires, and Sir Henry Sloane was a great collector, and he was responsible for a lot of the manuscripts and pieces that are in the British Museum. And so this is not the Goetia, this is the Key of Solomon, but these pieces date back to 1572. And so we can see here pictured is an early example of a circle of Solomon where the magician stands inside to protect themselves. The same sort of circles that get translated in the Lemegeton years later. And so then there's also Livre d'Esprit, the Book of Spirits, a 5th century French manuscript, and that lists 47 spirits that are attributed to King Solomon. And also Liber Officium Spiritum, the book called O.T.O, concerning the princes and kings of demons, and those are some ancient manuscripts that I was not able to find any images of. And so then we get to the Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, and this book is very responsible for where our modern day Goetia comes from. And the Pseudomonarchia Daemonum was added as an appendix to Johann Guer's book a couple of years later. And what's rather interesting about this book is that unlike other manuals of occult manuscripts and such, this book really was not trying to have you practice with these spirits. It was trying to warn you about how dangerous that they are. And so I have a quote that he writes in the beginning of it. In this most infamous age, where the kingdom of Christ is so attacked by the immense punishment and tyranny of those who openly perform the sacraments of Belial, who will no doubt soon receive their just reward, to whom I willingly and gladly dedicate these wasted hours, if perhaps, through the immeasurable mercy of God, they might be turned around and live. So I think that's rather interesting, how he's saying that perhaps by working with these spirits, people can be enlightened beyond the fact that they are something that is fallen and damned. Perhaps that's what he means. I'm not entirely sure. But what he did do was leave out a lot of important information that's in later editions, like the magical sigils. So this book just has the descriptions of who the demons are. And so here we finally get to the Lemegeton, the Lesser Key of Solomon. And so the Goetia is just one of the books. In it, there's also Ars Notoria, Ars Paulina, Ars Almedel, and Theurgia Goetia. And the other books are actually angelic workings as opposed to demonic workings. And so here we can see the evolved form of that Circle of Solomon, and here we see the triangle for putting a demon, and whereas in the Greater Key they don't have that. And so here is the Dictionnaire Infernal, and This book is where a lot of the illustrations that you've probably seen of demons came from, as well as that's where the images in this version of the Goetia most of them come from. And I feel like Louis Le Breton was one of the really great occult illustrators of his time. The French description at the bottom means the author meeting with the devil. And so this is one of the...
Hanging out.
Yeah, so I guess, it's nighttime and he's just having some cloud smoke with devil friend. And so this book is a French book. And
Precious monkey.
yeah, and so here we also have, this is the very famous picture of Baal. And so you can see that these demons, a lot of them were once gods from other cultures that became demons. And this, I see this picture all the time, but it was by Louis Le Breton. He did some really amazing artwork to depict demons and to help people sort of understand their strange forms. And here's another one that I liked of his, because it's one of the demons that I've worked with. And I found that, it was interesting because I hadn't really looked at these pictures before, and I did know the guy as sort of looking like this, and it's quite interesting. And so then we get to the Mathers and Crowley edition of the Goetia. So what is interesting about this was that Crowley writes a lot of stuff when he published the Goetia that are not actually true. So, because what happened was that Mathers was commissioned to do the Book of Gremlin the Mage and also the Goetia, but Crowley, he basically published the Goetia on his own and then called Mathers a dead hand and added some of his own things into it. And so what he adds and says is, these books were first found in the Chaldee and Hebrew tongues at Jerusalem by a Jewish rabbi, and by him put into the Greek language, and thence into Latin, as it is said. And so we know that the book was actually translated by Mathers from the Sloane Manuscripts, but he doesn't say that in the Goetia description when it's published. And also, I was trying to find the artist credit for this really interesting depiction that gets published in the Mathers and Crowley edition. And I'm not entirely certain who the author is, but I could speculate that it was Mathers' wife, who is also an artist, and she did a lot of really remarkable occult artwork that this could possibly be. And so then here we get to a version of the magic circle that my husband, who goes by Solway Coagula, did. And so here you can see how a modern magician has taken the ideas that are presented in the manuscripts and turned it into something that he learned from working with. And so here's an example of how you can do it at home in something that's manageable.
There's the demon right there.
You're not supposed to be in the circle, but yeah. And so this is right after we moved, and I wanted to make sure that there would be space in our living room to put down the Circle of Solomon. So, and before I would often just use chalk and draw my protective circle on the floor, but since carpet, I needed to figure out what to do. So I got robe scraps, and I measured them all out and sewed it together, and then painted the Hebrew god names around it. And so this version is easily rolled up, and you can put it around a table or your cat, and it doesn't get in the way of your home furnishings. So obviously you would want to make the temple look nice before you would actually start working with the Goetia, but this is a way that allows you to turn a regular living space into a magical temple. And so that's an example of what it looks like. And so here is the magic, Solway Coagula's magical triangle, and this is the triangle that the demons get trapped inside during your evocation. And so here is a picture of one of my past Goetic altars. So off to the left, you'll see there is a large sword. That sword is made out of iron, and I use the iron because it protects you from evil spirits. And iron is what they used to make old cemetery gates out of, and that is one of the reasons why. And so I would put the iron sword along the table to act as a barrier between myself and the spirit. Now here it's a little difficult to tell from the photograph, but there would be another magical triangle drawn on this mirror with dry erase board markers, and then that way I would sit in a chair facing this mirror, and I would be able to see the triangle around my face with the demon sigil drawn inside. You'll be able to see this in some later images, but just so you understand what's going on here. And the triangle that is on the table, that one also has the demon sigil on it, but this one is the actual seal with the metal that I have in the middle of the triangle, whereas the one on the mirror would just have the seal drawn on it. And then I have a decorative plate and then candles around it and incense. So here is sort of like a picture of me trying to show you. So you can kind of vaguely see me in the mirror there, and then there's another, the square plate is a demon seal in front of the mirror, and then so by standing in front of it you would be able to fully immerse yourself within the triangle. And by doing goetic work in this way, it really allows your reality to become very, very interesting. Like, I've had some really crazy visuals from working with the mirrors. I just use a regular sort of mirror, like I don't use any kind of black mirror or anything. I find just a dark room with candles and a regular mirror works just fine, because I'll find that my face will fade away, and then eventually I will start seeing things. I'll see the demon, I'll see the things the demon is wanting to show me, and it's super weird because your actual face and your whole self disappears if you sit in the dark looking into a mirror long enough and do these magical rituals. It's very strange. I've freaked people out who wanted to do this just because they thought it wasn't real and wanted to see if it worked, and the demons had a lot of fun with them. So, moving along, here is some examples of goetic seals. So, to the left, we have Dr. Rudd's seal, and Dr. Rudd was very influential for the Goetia because he put the letters around the seal, he put the seals in the circles. He also paired up all the demons with the Shemham Forash, and he also gave each of them a passage from the Bible that aligns with all the demons. Every demon has a passage that's from Psalms except for Sire, who's the first verse of Genesis, and that is the demon that we have as an example here. And we have Salve Coagula's piece of artwork of Sire that he made for me as a piece of art that was inspired by this goetic sigil. And so here is an example of what my actual seal for him looks like. It is a piece of tin, and it has the seal carved into it, and then it has been consecrated. And I feel like working with the actual metals is very important. These rituals are complicated purposefully because it makes it more meaningful. And I feel like if you're not ready to work with the king and you aren't able to obtain gold, then you should work with a lesser demon that has seals that you can afford to make and build your way up to working with things that you can't afford to work with. And this is the secret seal of Solomon. And this is the seal that gets put on the vessel of brass to store the spirits within and to entrap them. And traditionally, it's supposed to be painted with the blood of a black cock by a man who has not soiled himself with a woman for a month, and so on. And so that would go on the vessel that you want to seal spirits in. And so here is a drawing that I did as an example of my classic Goetia temple. So you can see that I've tried to illustrate how the mirror works. So the magician or magicians would be in this circle, or perhaps if there's not enough room in one circle, one magician would be behind them, so the person scrying would be in the circle that is closest to the mirror. There could be a chair in there as well, and then the other magician could be in another circle there, or they could both be in the same one. So that is drawn on the floor in chalk, or you use a magical circle to protect yourself. These are not all the things that you are suggested to do for the Goetia, but these are the things that I found work for me, and they're things that I've been able to do. So in the circle, you want to make sure you have all your magical items with you, so you're not leaving the circle while you're practicing the ritual. Like, you want to get all ready, and so I have like the sword and all your book of shadows, and if you are using a vessel of brass, that's in there too. There's some extra chalk in case you accidentally smudge your circle or something like that, something goes weird. Everything you need needs to be in that circle. And then outside of it, you have the triangle, and that is where you're evoking the demon into. And so you can see I have, here we go. So here is the seal right here, and it's on a little dish. And we have some candles on either side. And then here is the mirror, and the seal of the demon is drawn on the mirror as well. And it's also in a triangle here down below, because we want to make sure that the demon won't lie and deceive us. So it's important to try to keep the demons in a triangle. So then that way, when you're done the ritual, you can just wipe away the dry erase board part of the mirror, and as like part of your banishing as well. And so this is a nice temple room, because it also allows you to really focus on just the ritual that's being done. So try to not have distractions, or if you have distracting things in your room, try to put like cloth over it or something, so you can really focus on your visualizations. And these things do not come easily at first. Like for me, the first time I was trying to do the Goetia, first of all, I was terrified, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I had been practicing ritual magic for quite some time already, so I did feel like okay that I knew how to banish and I knew how to protect myself, but the idea of actually going and talking to a demon was really scary to me. And so I was sitting in a chair looking in the mirror trying to see something, and I just kept seeing this like weird colorful cloudiness, and that's all I was seeing. And then it didn't go any further than that. And then afterwards, I realized that like if I had allowed that to continue manifesting, it was actually doing what it was supposed to be doing, but my fear was getting in the way for me from being able to see anything. So I actually went and started working as the conjurer for the next many times doing the Goetia, and that allowed me to get over the fear of having the demon in the same room as me before I went back to trying to scry the demons again. Sure.
When you say working as a conjurer, what does that mean?
So the conjurer is the person that does the magic spells that get the demon to be in that triangle.
Okay.
So basically what you do for the Goetia is you do all your prep work that I'll continue to go through, but then there are certain rituals that are present that you do to evoke the demon. So Crowley added, first of all, the ritual of the Bornless one, but you don't have to do that. That's just something Crowley added. And then also he added the first two Enochian keys. I like to use those because I find that Enochian magic really helps to assert your power over the Goetic spirits. Right. And so then you do those, and then afterwards then there's Goetic conjurations that go into various levels of seriousness that eventually, you call upon their king and you call upon other things to threaten them, and then so the conjurer would be the person that would be doing all those rituals, whereas the scryer is the person that would just be talking to the spirit. And I find that it's really helpful to have at least two different people, because doing it all by yourself can be very, very distracting. When I do the Goetia by myself, I often make very stupid mistakes, and I find that the demons really want to take you by the hand and take you down the garden path. Like, they want to talk to you and show you things, and you could be there forever, like just getting lost in their circle of madness. So having a person there with you can really help you like focus and help you get on to the next thing. If you don't have somebody to work with, I find it really helps to have written down in your book like a list of all the things that you need to do.
Right.
So you don't get distracted when things get weird, because it always does. And so that's pretty helpful too. And so, what's next? Okay, so testing responses. So this goes into exactly what you were asking about. So the things that we do. So the conjurer would help with these things. So these are the methods that I use that help make sure that this ritual is legitimate. So it's not just like a bunch of people sitting in the dark imagining things. So there are a couple of methods that allow us to test this magic, and I'll explain it so it's a little easier to understand. So one method that I use is to code the questions, and by that I mean actually coding the questions from myself. So when I am in the circle, myself and whoever's conjuring, we don't know what questions we're asking the demon each time. So that way, it obviously doesn't work well if you're only asking one question, because you can't put it out of order and jumble it all up. But this helps so you don't realize like what you're actually asking, and that way, when you get a response, if it makes sense with the question that you're asking, then that helps you know that you're talking to something that's actually intelligent and you're not just making things up. So the way that I was taught to do it is you take all your questions, and so first you take a piece of paper and cut it up into little squares and write a number on each one of those pages for each one of your questions. Then you write out your questions in your journal and assign each one of them a number that would be the same number as those little cards. So then you take every single one of your questions and reword it. So let's say you want money and your question is, give me money this month. You would reword it to, I want some cash very soon. But you would never write that part down. Just write the first letters of that new made-up thing that corresponds to that. So the idea is the same, but the words that you're using are totally different words, but you never write those full words down. You just write the first letter of those words with that number that corresponds to the original question, and then that way, when you're in the ritual, the person that's conjuring, or even if just yourself, you just hold up those cards that are numbered to the demon, and then it can give you an answer based on the card you're showing up to it without ever having to verbally say the actual questions. So you'd be showing it a little thing that looks like a little card with a number and some random letters on it. And then when you get the response from it, you write down the number that was on that card and then whatever the response was. And then after the evocation is over, you go back and you look through the list and match up those numbers to what the actual question was. And then you can see if your answers have legitimacy. And these things are really important because working with these kinds of systems of magic can breed a lot of insanity in people, and it's really important to be careful when you're working with them and to banish before and to banish after, because you're doing yourself a disservice if you do not banish after doing your goetic evocation. If you've done the ritual properly, it is going to work even if you banish at the end, because it means that you did the ritual properly. You don't need to leave the demon in the room with you because it will just try to run its own agenda through you. And so another method of testing responses is using the Coagula to calculate messages, and I like to use Sefer Sephiroth for that because it has a really nice catalog. So what I like to do is I ask the demon to give me letters in Hebrew for each one of the things that I ask it as a test sign. So it'll be like Kaf Lamed Mem or something, and then I write those down. And then afterwards, I will look up what they equal in the Kabbalah and look up the meaning of that. And if it gave me those letters and they equal gold in the sign for a question where it was like, I need wealth, then you can see how these things are connected and they help add legitimacy to what you're doing. And it really does work. If you are working with the demon and you get them to give you Hebrew letters, I find that, I don't know if it's just because I know how to read Hebrew and the demons work with my own mind, or if it's because it's rooted in ancient Judaism. I'm not certain that they can give you Hebrew letters that add up to things in the Kabbalah that are actually relevant to the question that you asked. And so it's always great to just try to get as many test things happening during your rituals as possible, because that way you can really prove to yourself that you have spoken with something intelligent. Now, of course, the best way is if the things you've asked for, if they actually happen. That's the best way to know that it worked. But this is a good way to at least satiate your desire to know if you were just actually doing something or just being crazy in your basement. So let's move along. And so we're going to move on to the holy vestures. And so here's an example of not the specifically prescribed way of dressing, but just my interpretation of how I like to do it. So we have a robe here on the left, and you can see here down at the bottom, we have the hexagram of Solomon. Now, this thing up here is like a flap of fabric that gets pinned up. So when the demon reveals itself to you, you're supposed to reveal that seal to it, and that helps you get power. Traditionally, this is made from some pure linen. Oh. Go back, wait. We'll get there. Alright, there we go. Alright. So that's made of some pure linen, and then you can see that figure also is wearing a necklace, which is the Pentacle of Solomon. And the Pentacle of Solomon is made out of gold or silver, and it's also worn for protection around the neck from the spirits. And what you're traditionally supposed to do is, if you saw in the previous pictures how the seal was done out of a piece of metal, well, that metal is actually supposed to be made as a pendant that you wear at the same time as that pentagram of Solomon. And then you would be wearing them both together. So you would have the pentagram of Solomon made out of gold or silver around your neck, and then also the seal of the demon made out of its particular metal, which depends on, of course, its ranking. And then I also have shown another example. I like to wear like a more tank toppy type sexy dress when I do the Goetia because it gets hot, and also I find that like being sexy, demons sort of like that, and so I do that, and then I also have the pentagram tattooed on my stomach, so that's an example of like how I've been doing it. And then when I do the Goetia also, you can see on the arm here, there's the sigil of the demon that I would just draw on myself, because I'm already using the metal in a seal on the table, so that way it like connects it to myself again. But then I would always want to make sure to wash that off as soon as the ritual is over. So, moving on.
So not a magic marker.
Yeah. So here is an example of what my crazy journal looks like. So here's an example of an actual poetic ritual. So you can see along the top, also it's probably confusing. I write like it's a Hebrew book, so it's starting up here and it goes down like this. So you read it from the top like that. So here's a day, and here's a demon I was working with, Amdusias, and that's his name in Hebrew, in cursive Hebrew. And so then here are the questions, and they're all numbered. So each of the demons has different things that they do. So the questions are related to their what they do. And so he can do familiars. So what kind of familiars can he give? What can they do? What do you want in exchange for one? Can this power be transferred out of here? What are the sounds of instruments and trees bending for? My intent, and this is just what the intent would be, so you state your intent when you're doing the ritual at the beginning. So my intent is to witness the exorcism to physical appearance of the spirit Amdusias, and I've written this down, so during the ritual I remember to say that. And so then we were invoking Venus, doing Enochian calls 1 and 2, then doing the Goetic conjurations, the first 2. And then I asked for an identification word, and then I got these Hebrew letters, and it turned into the number 109 in Kabbalah. So this was added afterwards. Some of these things are things I would add in after, which is why it tends to get a little messy. But it's because when I get these Hebrew words, I'm going into the Kabbalah and looking up their number and then writing down what they mean so I can record my results. And so that equals lightning, music, and a circle. And he makes the sound of instruments and trees and such, and so it's relevant to him in that way. So I found that interesting. And so these are all, so you see it starts at 5 and then it goes 4, 2. So you can see these are all questions that were out of order because they were done from those cards. And so I actually chose this as an example because it was a goetic evocation that did not work well. And I have some examples coming up next to show you what happened. But I've had a lot, before I go into that, I've had a lot of really amazing things happen because of the Goetia. The Goetia helped me achieve things with my art career that were beyond anything I had ever dreamed of. It helped me meet my husband. I met him because he posted the sigil of a demon that helps you find maidens on Instagram. And then I saw that, and then I ended up moving from Canada to be with him. And then also the Goetia helped me through so many kinds of other situations. It's helped me find an apartment. I was having a super hard time to find an apartment, did a goetic evocation, and I said specifically, I need it right away. And it happened, and I got a place right before my lease was up. And then also it's helped me get money in many ways. But the thing about the Goetia and about working with magic is that it has to work through the means of your actual life. So things aren't just going to, or, they can sometimes, and I have seen it happen, but it's super rare. But usually the way things work is money will come from, I would find money in my pockets. I would get a mysterious check from the government that didn't make any sense. My bank statements wouldn't add up, and I would just have more money in my bank. I'd be at the grocery store, the cashier would bring things through and be like, that's weird, that looks like the wrong amount because it's way less, but then they'd just be like, whatever. Just things like that start happening. One time I actually found money 3 times in one day, and they were all $20 bills, and it was right after a goetic evocation. I had a coworker who used to just hand me money after doing goetic evocations for no reason at all. And but I knew the reason, but it gets super weird, but it always works through things that your life allows you to have. And so those were all really wonderful things that I've achieved from the Goetia. This working happened at a time when I was doing so much other magic. I was doing all kinds of Enochian stuff, and I was really not paying as much attention to this as I should have. So Amdusius we wanted a familiar from him, and he said he wanted to be a plant because he wanted to feel he wanted to celebrate the glory of God in sunshine and find his way back. So that's what he wanted to be when he was asked what sort of familiar he should be. And then he was going to be evoked into seeds that were generational plants from Stramonium datura, the devil's weed, that I had taken and had been working with that plant spirit for many years. And so I thought it would be neat to have this spirit be born into them. And so the idea was that these seeds would be planted, and then the spirit would grow into a plant in them, and then taking the plant would somehow give us knowledge or something. And so that was all done. But what he wanted in return was for his seal to be buried in sacred ground on the coldest day of the year. And for some reason, I completely forgot to do that, and it never happened. And there was even a follow-up evocation done after that to ask further questions about the ritual, to clarify more details about how to do it, but just I wasn't focused enough on this, which was the downfall, why I think it didn't work, because most of these things, the demon would want something in return for me working with it, and then I would do that, and then the thing would happen. But because I never did the thing he wanted, it didn't happen. And so here I have, sure, yes.
What's Venus? You said invoke
Oh, yeah, so it was working, that demon is associated with the planet Venus. So a Venus invocation was done, like before the Goetic invocation and after vanishing. So you could just do like a hexagram ritual for Venus. And did I answer your question? And so here are examples of what happened with that plant thing. So on the bottom, I have a picture of what normal Datura saplings look like when they first come in from the ground that I took in comparison of this thing. And I've tried to blow up what happened, but it doesn't seem to be looking too sharp on this projector. But the thing that grew did not look like Datura at all, but more like a spider's leg. It had, little Daturas have little hairs on it. This had no little hairs. Little Daturas have purple and just a completely different coloring from the thing that grew. And there was no leaf on the end, but more like almost like a foot. And this thing grew, and alongside it, this weird red and black mold. And I have always had pretty good success growing plants, so the fact that nothing grew and that this weird thing grew and then died a couple weeks later was very strange. And so I tried to show you what happened with that. And then, so now we're going to go into some of my artwork. Oh, sure. Yes. Sure.
So, so you didn't bury it, but at a particular time, what's stopping you from burying it anyway? Like later, like at another
right.
cold.
I could.
Winter.
You're absolutely right. I could go back and do that.
Without like, I mean, just
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I feel like if I were to try to do that again, I think the spirit would probably be willing to try to give me another chance, because maybe it just, that wasn't the right time for that to happen, because I can't see outside of time, but sometimes these entities can, so. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a good idea, and maybe I should, because it's come up today, and you brought that up. Perhaps I should, because that would be kind of cool just to see it, do a follow-up on that and like see what happens. So this is the first thing I painted after I started working with the Goetia. It's called The Vision, and I thought it was neat because it just always sticks out in my mind as a relevant piece of work, because it was all just about like the third eye opening and seeing things that I never thought possible. I had done ritual magic for like maybe 5 years or so beforehand, working with God form invocations, path workings, different sorts of meditation and other things, the invocation of the Bornless One, but I never did anything that was like actually trying to see a spirit and talk to it. And I had been doing artwork, so it was a big deal for me to cross those over and have them start working in concert. So after that, I went through this like cat painting phase, and I did these little cat spirits.
Because your cat was in the circle.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, cats are very interesting spiritual creatures, and I started seeing these little cat spirits that look like little shadow cats. Often around the same time that I started working with more spirit invocation, because like I was saying, it's like a muscle, so the more that anyone does this kind of stuff, the more you'll be able to see things. And so I've had a lot of cats, and I feel like sometimes I see their spirits, and so that's what these paintings are about. And I think doing artwork really helps to do spirit communication as well, because it allows you to work with that part of yourself that is creative and that creates images, and that is the same part of yourself that's creating this experience for you. And it doesn't make it any less real because it's coming from your own mind, because that's where everything we experience comes from. And so here is a piece called Transgression, and it's like about, evolving beyond the self that we previous were. Did that around the same period of time for an art and fashion event that was in LA. And then this piece is called Blood Magic, and it is about overcoming your fears and working with those primordial powers that are within all of our blood, and allowing yourself to tap into that current that's inside you to release your own inner power. And so working with the spirits has helped me with that, and it's a little tricky to see, but there is a triangle painted on the ground below her, so it's almost referring to the Goetia and that triangle of evocation, and how working with things that we are afraid of can really help us to grow, and it doesn't necessarily make you into some sort of evil or dark person. You know, there's a danger with that in any sort of magic, but darkness is beautiful. It's the darkness of space and the darkness of our great mother's womb. And so there really is no harm in going there as long as you respect it and you learn from it. And sure, yeah.
I said before, like iron protects you from an evil spirit.
Yeah.
So is there good ones and evil ones?
Yeah, there's all different kinds of spirits. There's spirits that are helpful, and then there's spirits that are not helpful. Definitely, like, if you're having a hard time in your life, it can attract more negative spirits because they, like, can feed off your energy and stuff like that. So that's why, like, you know, protecting yourself from these things can often start as simply by just, like, trying to maintain a positive, energetic space in your home, things like that.
You don't mess with the negative spirits?
Well, the Goetia is all about taking these so-called evil and dark spirits and getting them to do things for you. And it's okay to work with these evil spirits as long as you are the one in control of it. And just like the legend of Solomon's temple, he used these spirits that are supposed to be evil and devils and had them build his great temple in Jerusalem. So, yeah.
I kind of look at it as kind of, the spirits are like small children, unruly children. And if you give them something to do, productive to do, they tend to behave themselves a lot better.
Yeah.
And you get them to work for you, as
Absolutely.
opposed to against you.
I totally agree with that. And my husband often says that to me. He's like, make sure you're treating that demon like a kid. Don't forget. So, yeah.
I've heard some practitioners talk about cajoling and threatening the demons, and others talk about kind of just speaking respectfully and asking for exchanges or collaboration. What's your approach, and can you just speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So for myself, I have never actually threatened the demons. I've always been able to work with them by talking to them in just a very assertive way. Mm-hmm. And that's very important, but also, like, I think that sometimes it is necessary, and there probably will be a point in my magical experiences when I will need to do that. Mm-hmm. But I haven't ever worked with any of the Goetic kings, for example, so I feel like perhaps it's just the particular demons I was working with, because they all really do have distinctive personalities that I found from conversing with other magicians as well. Like, be like, oh wow, he was like that and he looked like that, wow, it looked the same for me, and like, that's super weird but very interesting. So yeah, I don't think that it's bad to do those things, because certainly they were put in the Goetia for a reason, and I think maybe like the demons might like it, and because, or something, it's weird, it's, you know, it's like hell and torture, but that's like their world, and like that's beautiful to some people, so maybe they like that, I don't know. So, yeah, so that's how I feel. I've never actually done that, but I definitely am assertive with demons and don't let them just do whatever they want, and I'm very careful about it, and I try to balance myself by not only working with demonic magic and working with other kinds of magic too, because that's really important. I have a couple more pieces of art. This one actually has a Goetic sigil hidden in it that I did for an art show that was about monsters. And this piece is called My Demon Mother, and it's supposed to be about Eve and like the corruption of Eve and Lilith having this pomegranate, which is what I interpret the apple to be. And so she's got this pomegranate and is feeding off of Eve's remains, and that one in the background has a demon sigil, because I thought it would be interesting to put a demon sigil in a painting and have it in our gallery. This one is called Mystery of Mystery, and it's inspired by the Gnostic Mass, but also it has all these little creatures along the borders of it, and all of those are supposed to be like little spirits that are around us, and she's sort of crouching in this box that's also like her sacred house 418, and it's also like a doorway to space. So you could almost see this painting to be a metaphor for doing astral work, because she's focused in this one little space, but she's surrounded by all these things happening that are not apparent to ordinary reality, and is tapping into the great void of space and the great unknown. And then this piece is called Mary Magdalene, and so here we see a female character, and she is being greeted by two spirits while she is meditating, and they're entities of light, I guess. When I do paintings, very often I'm not like planning beforehand what they're going to be, so I'll just stare at the canvas for a long period of time. Often I'll paint a background, and then I'll look at it until figures start to appear themselves to me, which is very similar to how I do spirit vision things, and like working with the Goetia by looking into a mirror. It's the same as looking onto a canvas, and so that's why like anyone who's interested in doing this kind of spiritual work, like I definitely encourage all of you to try to do artwork. It doesn't matter if your art is good. No one's art is good just off the bat. Like you have to practice all the time. Like I practice all the time to paint, but don't let that stop you, because you'll always keep getting better, and it will help you become a better magician if you can express yourself creatively. And giving spirits a creative outlet to work with through you will help you to be more sane. Because if you're just trying to like bottle all these things inside and not letting it be expressed in some sort of way that's beyond like our regular ho-hum reality, it can drive you really crazy, because you have all these wonders in your head, and there needs to be some sort of way for you to share the things that you're learning with other people, even if it's not drawing, maybe it's playing music or something like that. And so then this is a piece that is called Evocative Seduction, and it is about having sex with demons, which is something that I've done, and it is a strange thing. Having a relationship with a spirit is not the same as having a relationship with a human, and it can get quite lonely, which is why I'm now married to a human person, or so I'm saying. And so, but other than that, this is about like, demons, and how they're demons, so they like sex, and be careful, because they'll try to get that from you. If that's something that you're looking for, it can happen, but just be careful and don't let them just feed off of you whenever they want to. That's what I have to say. If you're working with it in some kind of sexual way, make sure you're the one in control over these things and not letting it just take your energy, because that can happen to you. And so then this is a painting of my husband and I. And so obviously I included it because we met each other from both of our work with the Goetia. I had also been working with the Goetia to try to find a person to be with. And so it was rather interesting that those things synced up, and they led us to one another. And so that's what that piece is about. And then finally I have this piece called Lay Your Head in Hallowed Ground. And it is about a person who has just died, and they're seeing a spirit before them. And I feel like working with these mysteries really helps us to come to terms with our own mortality, and realize that reality is so much greater than everything that is easily explained. And like hopefully, in death maybe we'll learn more, but I don't know, I don't have any answer. And so that concludes the class today. And here's my website. Thank you. Here's my website if anyone wants to check out more of my art.